Hello dear friends, I'm Brother Sean, and I'm sharing with you a heart response to a program I watched on television. And the program was quite challenging on many levels, because as a Catholic Christian, I sensed I had to watch this program. And the program highlighted the cover-up and the abuse of priests towards children. But what was particularly challenging was that in Wisconsin, USA, in the 1974 onwards, there was a residential school for hearing impaired boys and girls, and also who were unable to communicate their feelings. It was so disturbing to listen to watch even them perform sign and explain and express their feelings and their anger at their beloved church. And the cover-up, the lack of transparency, right to the very top, left me feeling deeply, deeply challenged. That how could men and women of God betray their trust? I am aware that abuse has gone on for centuries, and from the very beginning that the Catholic Church and all religions were formed, abuse has taken place, not just within the Catholic Church, but there are abuses now right across mainstream society, and we found it here in the UK with our politicians and in the House of Lords, with members abusing the system, abusing their privilege. So where have we gone wrong in society to lose that sense of common decency? How can we expect to look up to our leaders when they are violating the basic laws of human decency? I know that in Ireland, where my family live, there are very few people going to the church. Many have withdrawn. They've not abandoned their faith, but they've abandoned their church because of the duplicity, the secrecy, and the lies. What is so scandalous is that the hierarchy have to live to a law like we have to live to civil law. In the church it's called canon law. The structures within the Catholic Church are corrosive. I experienced that myself as a nursing monk, and I've experienced the impact of the lack of transparency in my work with clients, in my work with religious sisters who've been abused within the church, clients who've been abused by priests, brothers and nuns. And as I speak, I am aware that not too far from here there are priests, paedophile priests in hiding, being looked after, protected by the church. I wonder what God is saying to us. But I know when I watched this 90-minute Storyville, it was called, about the deaf and the dumb, and how they were systematically abused and groomed by one priest, and how he used his powers of influence. Even the civil authorities wouldn't believe the innocent victims, and then one day they decided as adults to do a poster, and they paraded the poster in front of the courts in Wisconsin. And a kind, caring and compassionate soul believe them, and against many obstacles from within the church, where they had hate mail, where they were being blackmailed from daring to speak the truth. So I would say, has the structures within our church become demoniac, or are they angelic? I never realized there was so much corruptibility within the church, and the head person, the named person who took responsibility for all paedophile priests from the 80s right up until he became Pope was Benedict, known as Cardinal Ratzinger. And some of the bishops and archbishops of the diocese would contact Rome because they had to through canon law. And the case in question weren't even replied to for at least 12 months or 2 years, which meant that the abuser carried on systematically abusing whilst the church was aware. That is so scandalous. And I feel ashamed to say I'm a Catholic Christian, but there's one thing, I do not buy into that sort of lifestyle. And there were some interesting Benedictine priests who had left their priesthood because they were assigned to try and resolve the scandals by healing, by acting as a kingdom builder, to try and restore priestly duties to the diocese that were being impregnated with more and more abused paedophile priests. The priests were taken out of their parish where the victims were being abused and sent to another to carry on abusing. And this is so sad, it's so tragic, that men of God should do this. But I'm under no illusion now. But I thank God that I had the courage to come away from my church. I love my church. But the church has lost sense of its duty of care to its people who are the church. In the program, it talked about the church's response. And from bishops right up to the Pope, the last Pope, all they were concerned about was protecting the priesthood. Many of the hierarchy felt that when these cases were being exposed by victims of abuse, by the media, that they were being accused of attacking the church. They weren't. I wouldn't dream of attacking my church. But I certainly am doing this video to voice my deep concerns at the lack of transparency and also a structure that's more about keeping up appearances than healing wounds. The victims of abuse are members of a loving family, supposedly. But many of those victims have been annihilated and castigated by their own parishioners for daring to speak against the church. In parts of Ireland, you wouldn't dream of name-calling the church or a priest because you perceive them as men with miracles and powers and magic, that they had a special place in the kingdom of God, that they were almost like gods. And I remember as a little boy, if the priest was out, you'd genuflect to him. And yet they abused their position. But interestingly, what I found extremely humbling was to hear a Benedictine talk about his research into priestly celibacy. And his research took him many, many years. And his conclusions were interesting in that he said 50% of the priesthood respects celibacy, whereas the other 50% totally disregard it, where they have mistresses, where they have children, where they violate their vows, and where they abuse children. So if that is the case, then isn't it right that those priests and religious should be removed from office. There's nothing wrong with a man and woman getting married, or two people of the same sex who love one another to have a commitment. But I think it's wrong to say that you're in service to God and having dedicated your life to God, and then you go on and you undermine the goodness of God to his children. The Catholic Church, along with all of the religions of the world, especially their leaders, their hierarchy, their governing body, they need to take stock and realize that they wouldn't be where they are if it wasn't for the faithful, the membership, who pay their dues and who expect decency. But today we should have transparency. And the Catholic Church needs to learn from this, instead of paying out all this money to pay victims of abuse. There needs to be some halfway point where there is healing and support, but instead the victim, a devout believer, has been left bereft because of the lies and the scheming conversations from priests and archbishops trying to denounce the victims. And what is so tragic, that all of the investigations being carried out between victims and the church or the diocese in the various churches in the world, they've had to sign a letter of silence forbidding them to discuss. And many who did that did it in all innocence, that their case would be heard. It wasn't. It was binned. So before God, I ask forgiveness for a church that I love but no longer like, for its lies, and until its structures are dealt with, until there is more transparency and humility seen from the hierarchy to the whole family of God. But I take heart too, because Jesus said, where 2 or 3 are with you, I am with you. So I know that the suffering Christ is here with his suffering people, and he will hold these men and women to account. And they too have to come to the day of judgment. But until that time, my concern is for the survivors. I'm a survivor of mental illness, where a prescribed drug took away my life because of lies from an American president. Well, he was Senator Bush's father, who withheld the truth from the FDA because Eli Lilly were financially supporting him. So there was no adverse reactions recorded to Prozac. But yet I know many professional people like myself have had their lives ruined, and many have ended up in prison like I did for manic behavior, and where we suffered. But we forgive and we move on. But we must learn, mustn't we? We must not condone this sort of violence against any child of God. And my prayer today, from using and doing this video, is to speak to your heart, that not all people in ministry are bad. I know a lot of men and women who are priests and religious who are good people, and they would never dream of hurting a fly, least a child. And yet they've been tarnished. They live in fear of being seen touching and embracing a child. And I feel for them, because their colleagues, their church, have let them down because of its structure, because it is corrosive. So I would say the structures of the church are demoniac, not angelic. And I pray that the Spirit of God will move our present Pope Francis, who appears to be an honourable and just man, that he will have the strength to break through the facade of corruptibility from the very top, where many cardinals do not walk the talk, they talk the walk. Everybody needs to be brought to account as a child of God, whether you're a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Sikh, a Muslim, a Christian or a Jew. We do live in a beautiful world, but society has become corrupt on every level. Every level. But we have to stand up, though we might be few. We have to stand up for what is decency, for what is right, for what is truthful, and disregard having to pay the price. And I know from doing this video, I will receive hate mail. But I'm not worried about that. I'm just saying that if there are any clergy watching this video, I appeal to your decent heart as a child of God to put right the wrongs, where many of us are law-abiding citizens of our land, and where we love God and respect our holy men and women in service to God, but they have betrayed our trust, and someone needs to repair that. And it's time that we all came out of the closet, hoping that it will go away. It won't go away. You and I have to face our truth, and you and I have to live with our conscience. So let us pray together for transparency to exist in every form of life, in every government department, in every country and in every religious family. Let there be transparency, and let the children of God be respected as equals and not treated as a burdensome pain in the rear. The survivors of abuse need our support, not our condemnation, because many of them have committed suicide. I know of nuns who've been abused by priests. They were young girls, innocent when they entered the convent. They didn't have any sex education back in the 50s, and where priests abused them. And when one or two of them went to convey what happened to their superiors, they were removed. They were told to leave for stirring up trouble against the church. They were called devils. And I had the privilege of meeting 4 such women about 9 years ago in Dublin when I ran a retreat healing day. And they came up to me at the end, and I was almost bleeding in my arms where their nails stuck into me. And I asked them to forgive, and they found it very hard. And these were intelligent women, professional women, but they were carrying so much guilt. I sat with them for a long time, and we all cried together, and we asked God to forgive those who perpetrated such violence. And when we had a group hug, we were all wet through, because the tears were healing tears, and there was a great love there. And I sensed in my heart they were touched and healed of their demons, and they left. I've never heard from them again, but I know they're safe and well. And that's the Christ I love. Not the religion with all the do's and the don'ts. I can't cope with that. That's why now I prefer to live a simple life as a member of the Teo community who do not buy into religion, dogma or canon law. We love all faiths, we embrace all faiths, but we do not allow our hearts to be controlled by dogma. because that is corrosive. Like Francis, we try to keep it simple. Like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the man is just a beautiful man. Like Mother Teresa of Calcutta, like Gandhi and Sri Chinmoy and Jesus. They allowed the love of their God flow out from their being. That's what we have to do today. Show loving kindness instead of being a whipping boy. I pray what I've shared with you hasn't offended you, because what I shared with you is from a heart that cares, and a heart that will tell survivors of clerical abuse that we do care, and that truth must come out, and that transparency is a must within all faiths, and especially within the Christian Church. Thank you for your time. May God bless you. Namaste.